Hello, good morning, friends. Very warm welcome to you. We have two very distinguished authors. On my right is Mr. Badri Narayan, author of Republic of Hindutva, and he's a very famous columnist. He was always there on television in many discussions. He lectures and tours all over the country. And on my left, of course, a person who needs no introduction, and she wears so many hats. She's a scholar, author, director of Sunday Guardian newspaper, and she's also, her book, which I read recently with a great interest about claiming citizenship and nation. That's a very, today, friends, we are having a very, as you know, this is a festival of ideas, and an idea that's been, I would say, a very provocative idea that we are going to discuss to start with. So it's going to be quite a, cracking beginning of this festival of ideas, and it's about politics of appeasement. So I'll turn to Mr. Badri Narayan to know what is this, how do we define this appeasement? Has it been defined, and what is your own take on this politics of appeasement?
Yeah, Rashid Sahab, in fact, this is way to look the processes of politics. There is one position is this is the politics of appeasement, and there is another position is this is the politics of inclusion or giving representation. So there the same thing may be analyzed into different way. But you know, in any democracy, I think majority should be calculated, identified, and also minority should be visible. So without considering the majority in the defining democracy or in the process of democracy, we will do mistake. That's why this notion of appeasement emerged, because they think this is the appeasement politics. They are appeasing certain groups and ignoring us. And that sense of ignorance creates a kind of a psyche of disprivilege. And that psyche of disprivilege creates a condition for mobilization, political mobilization. And when these kinds of political mobilization take place, then this politics of appeasement become a real in terms of mobilizational instrument. So that's the thing.
Thank you very much. Before we discuss whether there is a politics, what are the dimensions of politics of appeasement and all, you think what does appeasement consist of? Is it institutional or is it political favoritism?
Appeasement is a very, I would say, now it's something which has captured our national imagination in terms of, especially in the political space. It is something that's spoken of extensively, and a large part of what constitutes appeasement is associated with the, like when I was writing my book, and I was thinking about politics of appeasement, and that there was no other way that you could write about that. There are two things that comes to my mind. One is that a title is associated with the Congress Party and a particular kind of politics of the Congress Party from the 50s and 60s, which the Bharatiya Janata Party characterizes as constituting appeasement, favoring one group over the other, and that is the whole idea behind developing this bogey of appeasement. You have to understand, appeasement has to be understood in a particular context. It cannot operate in a vacuum. So we have to contextualize the India of the 50s, 60s, and even the India of today in order to understand how does appeasement operate. Of course, there is appeasement if not ambiguous terms, sometimes in direct ways. So we have to understand how is appeasement operating and what impact it has on the situation on the ground. For the Congress, it to a large extent, it brings up a lot of questions about the party and its role. So we have to analyze appeasement in the context of who is practicing it, and how does it operate, what is the social context, and what is the political context.
Thank you, very enlightening. Mr. Mr. Bhadin, when we talk about appeasement, a general impression, or many of the people in the audience would be having, that a particular community is benefiting from it, and that is why it is called some kind of appeasement. But in light of what was mentioned by the Sachar Committee report, that if you talk about the minorities, and largest minority being Muslims of India, their socio-economic indicators have fallen way behind the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. How do you reconcile these two concepts, this politics of appeasement and the ground, so to say, the ground reality of very poor socio-economic indicators of the largest minority, that being Muslims?
Rashid Sahab, actually there are difference between representation and appeasement. Representation means you are giving representation to the community as a whole, and representation in substantial ways. But what is happening in India, in all political parties are doing just a symbolic, symbolic representation, and that symbolic representation to the a certain section of those community. And the community, the section which is powerful, which is elite of those community. So they are being offered positions, the various kinds of visible political positions. And secondly, they consider, if you consider a community as a vote, not as a community as a life universe, community as a community which requires a development in real sense. So in India, what is happening and what happened after freedom, that we consider this minority community as a vote bank. And to do vote bank, to evolve them as a vote bank, we do various kinds of symbolic politics. And in that process, the real substantial development of the community is goes to backward, to the back side of the developmental story. And that is happening in India. So this entire minority community, either Muslims or Christians or whatever, or especially Muslims, you have talked about the Sachar Committee report. The underdevelopment of the community is because of we considered them as a vote bank and gave representation to their elites. They are a kind of section which is visible, which has a power to speak. Now Pasmanda thing is happening. You have already seen the Prime Minister talked about Pasmanda, and recently we visited in a Pasmanda village, and the person, I was talking to a person, and he said, Pradhan Mantri ne naam liya hum logon ka. So this Pradhan Mantri ne naam liya is a very catchy thing for them. Yes. And you have heard that Pradhan Mantri in his Bhopal lecture, he took the name of many of the community of the which comes on the Pasmanda. And that is the method which I observed in the Kashiram politics, because when Kashiram used to deliver lecture, he used to take the name of the castes. Yes. So this empower them. So there are various communities, so real development will go to them. And when we will take community not as a vote bank, but community as a life universe, and community as a part of the entire development story, as a stakeholder, not as a recipient. And here what is happening in India, that's why the entire inclusion, entire representation is turning as appeasement, because we are treating them as a vote bank. That happens. You see the politics of various political parties, the way they give tickets to these communities. Sayyid Sahab ko de dena hai, इनको दे देना है, मुस्लिम होना चाहिए, they don't even know कि वो मुस्लिम में भी कौन है, किसको हम वोट टिकट देने जा रहे हैं, और दलित में भी कौन है जिसको हम टिकट देने जा रहे हैं. So they give the tickets, and they thought that community is for us and we'll get the vote. So
I think it's something we need to ponder over it, that actually it is not benefiting the community, it's just a kind of slogan, a jumla in that sense. Dr. Aishwarya Pandit, you have studied in a very academic sense. Do you think that framers of our constitution, they also made some kind of, I would say there was an oversight of framing of Article 21, Article 30, and of course Article 370, which has been removed now, that gave a kind of opportunity for political parties to do this politics of appeasement?
I think we have to look at the colonial legacy here, and that has an overwhelming kind of influence on this. The British primarily saw the natives as a group interest. They did not, you were not imagined individually in their calculation, but you were seen as group interests. So this is Hindus, this is Muslims, this is Sikhs, and these are Christians. They are blocks, they function as blocks. So we must satisfy each block and kind of govern. So over a period of time, what actually happened was, while framing the constitution, a lot of that which was viewing the population of the subcontinent as blocks was more or less observed by the constitution drafters. So there were no individual interests that were imagined. There were community interests they were imagined as Badri Narayan has articulated. You were imagined as a Rajput, a Zamindar, a Dalit, a Kurmi, this. You were identified in terms of a larger community. So individual interests were sidelined. The second aspect became is, and which he's rightly pointed out, is because they were identified as block interests, a lot of time they ended up giving tickets to people who they thought represented the community. For example, I can think of this example and cited in my book also, that for the longest time in the 80s, 90s, and right up till 2004, Shahi Imam during every election gave out a fatwa saying, I support Congress, or I support the Janata Party, or I support this one, that. Saying that the Shahi Imam, as a representative of Indian Muslims, gives out the fatwa, which is one kind of directive to vote in favor of a particular party. Now, there were a couple of things which were problematic. Fatwa A is not a directive, it is an opinion which is expressed. It can be taken or it cannot be taken. The second aspect was we were assuming that Shahi Imam represented the interests and the voices of an entire section of Muslims. So that concentrated the power in the hands of the elites, and real representation did not happen. What it eventually did was the representation which was given by certain parties was characterized as being given to show boys. You need show boys of every kind. A show boy of a Hindu, a show boy of a Muslim, a show boy of a Sikh, and other things. So it didn't really, the democratic process became confined to these few elites. It did not percolate to the lowest levels. And that is largely responsible for this tag of appeasement coming up again and again. Because we are not really looking at the grassroots. We are looking at who we think represent certain communities and certain interests. So that leads to concentration of power in the hands of a few. So that was the problem.
So what, well, I'll pose the same question to you. What Dr. Aishwarya Pandit has said, that actually it was that at the time of framing of constitution, certain communities' interests were taken in account, and because of that, this Article 21, Article 30, and of course Article 370, several articles were incorporated. What is your take? I mean, do you think this constitution itself has given a kind of an opening for so what you describe as politics of appeasement?
The constitution is a document. It depends on you how you are taking it further, and how you are translating it in a public discourse or popular discourse, and also discourse of development. So I'm not going to blame constitution for it, because constitution has its own autonomy, and the way constitution is conceived, it's a very pious in that way. But when politicians take the constitution in their hand, एक सुग्गा जैसे like a parrot, जब parrot उसके हाथ में आता है, तो वो कितना दबाएगा उसको, it पे depend करता है कि सुग्गा मरेगा कि सुग्गा तेजी से उड़ेगा. So it depends on the in the hand of the politician, those who are how they are going to take this constitution. But what I would like to say, that this politics of appeasement is not because what is politicians, political parties are doing for the community, but what they are not doing for others. Yani ignorance, sense of being ignored, or sense of being taken for granted. Like majority has a complaint that they are not doing for us because they take us for granted, and they are maybe symbolically, but they are doing a lot of halla gulla for a certain community, and that's halla gulla avoids dominant and majority community. And you know, in any democracy, what I am arguing, without calculating the psyche and aspirations of majority, you can't handle a good democracy. Making good democracy and balanced democracy, you need to take consideration of the psyche, social psyche and social desire or aspirations of the dominant or the majority community. But what happened in India after freedom? The things happened in just opposite way. Because most of the politicians are coming from the Hindu community and they think, oh, this is our community. So that we don't, like, Nehru was, someone asked to the Nehru that, आप तो इलाहाबाद के लिए कुछ करते नहीं हैं. बोला इलाहाबाद तो हमारा, हम तो पूरे देश के प्रधानमंत्री हैं. No, he was not प्रधानमंत्री of Allahabad. So similarly, Hindu तो हमारी community है. Why we are worried about them? We should worried about others. But that's invite in majority community since 70 years of Indian political history. And that अब वो एक सीमा इतनी आगे बढ़ गई है कि that become a common sense. This ignorance has transformed as a Hindutva common sense, and that Hindutva common sense is not giving. Yesterday someone told to me a very interesting thing. That is not because of, you don't blame the politicians. The public are in that way suffering from that psyche. So they are in that way telling this ignorance story that we are being ignored. If you go in the train or the buses or the chai shop, if you talk about anything, they will react in this way. So now it's the public discourse. So that's my argument, that it is because appeasement logic is continuing because not what politicians or political parties are doing, what Congress is doing, what Samajwadi Party is doing for them, but what, how and why the majority community is being ignored in the entire process of discussions, either symbolic discussion or substantial discussions, whatever.
I couldn't agree with Dr. Badri Narayan on this point because when I examined certain documents during the AICC papers, and not many of them have been cited, a large part of the letters was that we, the Hindus of Sitapur, we the Hindus of Barabanki, we the Hindus of Devariya, we would like to protest against being ignored with this decision to partition India, not being consulted while giving tickets. Why are you giving tickets in a particular constituency to this person, that person? So that became a part, overwhelming popular narrative. So it is not a top-down.
I was about to ask you, I have seen your book is your work is very fascinating because you have captured that entire politics of Uttar Pradesh from post-partition till 1986. How do you reconcile with this fact? Here is Congress party being accused of doing this politics of appeasement, and from your book and with data that you have tried, you have cited a lot of examples that how actually the Muslims in Uttar Pradesh were discriminated in government jobs, in recruitment, and all kind of places. So how do you think this narrative build? I mean, here was a political party which was actually trying to, put a lid on what was bringing a particular community into a national mainstream or say, and at the same time it's being accused of giving them a favorable position, even if it was not backed by in terms of jobs or employment, etc. Or political empowerment.
See, if you ask me whether the narrative comes from, with respect to the Congress, it comes from that extensive use of the term secularism. Whoever I interviewed during the course of my PhD, if they didn't know, if they were not aware of the other aspects of politics or society, they were certainly aware of secularism as a word. What it meant, they all had their own definitions of secularism. Yes, to a great degree in Uttar Pradesh in particular, a large part of the complaints that went to the Congress High Command and which are registered in the AICC papers or even in the Humayun Kabir papers A large part of the complaints were that Muslims were being shunted out of service, they were not in defense services, they were not in strategic services, they were not in police services, and and these were complaints to the Congress High Command. And while at the same time, the Congress was issuing tickets to people who had, who were erstwhile Muslim Leaguers, they had advocated the cause of Pakistan. So that dichotomy was something that I capture in my book. On the one hand, Congress was, and Congress leaders like Sampurna Anand, P.D. Tandon, they were of the view that we now need to keep the interests of the majority also in mind. They cannot be completely ignored. While at the same time, there was Nehru, who, on the other hand, who was expressing a completely different opinion. Oh, they're minorities, they need to be protected, but they were never protected. They were never given the representation, despite Nehru's advocacy for not mixing religion and politics.